After the summer was over, the Shelleys moved back to England, where they stayed for a year. And this was the most settled that Shelley had ever been. Their son William was doing well, and they had a daughter, Clara, in September. The poem that he wrote, The Revolt of Islam, reflected their partnership, and he wrote the dedication to Mary, calling her child of love and light.
So now my summer task is ended, Mary, and I return to thee, my own heart's home. As to his queen, some victor knight of faery, earning bright spoils for her enchanted dome. Nor thou disdain that ere my fame become a star among the stars of mortal night, if it indeed may cleave its natal gloom, its doubtful promise thus I would unite with thy beloved name, thou child of love and light.
Sadly, Shelley's first wife, Harriet, who had probably turned to prostitution as her only means of financial support, drowned herself in the Serpentine in Hyde Park. It was ironic that Shelley had written the dedication at the beginning of Queen Mab to Harriet. Shelley and Mary married, primarily in order for Shelley to gain custody of his children by Harriet, Ianthe and Charles. This was refused, and the children were given to foster parents, because Shelley was an atheist. Shelley and Mary, together with Claire and Allegra, her daughter by Byron, moved back to the continent. Whilst in Venice, Shelley's baby daughter Clara died of a fever. By the time they moved to Rome in June 1819, their son William also died. Shelley renewed his friendship with Byron in Italy, but was shocked at how Byron's appearance and lifestyle had dissipated. And Allegra soon died as well, in a convent where she had been sent by Byron to be educated. It was in August 1819 that I believe the most important political event of Shelley's life occurred. This was the public meeting in Manchester at St Peter's Fields, which would become known as the Peterloo Massacre. A large crowd of about 60,000 to 80,000 working people assembled to hear speakers for parliamentary reform and universal voting. The government had already had their spies discover what was planned and had assembled the local yeomanry and the militia. The local magistrate, seeing the enthusiastic reception that was given to the main speaker, Henry Hunt, issued a warrant for Hunt's arrest. The chief constable decided that the size of the crowd around the speaker made it necessary to send in the yeomanry and the militia. They rode on the crowd with sabres drawn. Women and children were not spared. The unarmed crowd fought back as best they could with bricks and stones. The crowd could not disperse even if they'd wanted to, because they were blocked by the 88th Regiment of Foot with fixed bayonets. They were charged upon by two separate regiments. Within 10 minutes the crowd had dispersed. There were 11 dead and over 600 injured. One of the casualties was called John Lees, and he died from his wounds a few days later. He was an ex-soldier who had been at Waterloo.
At Waterloo it was man to man, but there it was downright murder.
Shelley heard about the massacre, as it came to be called, in September. He had always advocated passive resistance, but how practical would that be against trained soldiers wielding sabres?
Let the tyrants pour around with a quick and startling sound, like the loosening sea, troops of armed emblazonry. Let the charged artillery drive till the dead air seems alive, with the clash of clanging wheels and the tramp of horses' heels. Let the fixed bayonets gleam with a sharp desire to wet its bright point in English blood, looking keen as one for food. And if the tyrants dare, let them ride among you there, slash and stab, maim and hew, what they like, that let them do. With folded arms and steady eyes, and little fear and less surprise, look upon them as they slay, till their rage has died away. And that slaughter to the nation shall steam up like inspiration, eloquent, oracular, a volcano heard afar. And these words shall then become like oppression's thundered doom, ringing through each heart and brain, heard again, again, again. Rise like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. Shake to earth your chains like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, but they are few. What
Shelley wanted for England was nothing short of a revolution. 200 years after Shelley's first publication, I think he would have recognised the country today as being almost exactly the same as the one he lived in. I think he would have been saddened by how little has changed, but heartened by the reforms that have been achieved. Universal suffrage.
Yeah, except now there are a few worth voting for.
National minimum wage.
But businessmen avoid tax by registering their companies abroad.
And still a monarchy.
Who are no more than an expensive tourist attraction.
And a Tory government, no different from the one which was in power when Shelley was alive. I believe that Shelley would have agreed wholeheartedly with Vivienne Westwood, urging everyone to refuse to be brain damaged by the media and bludgeoned into submission. In her later career, Vivienne has embraced environmental activism as the most important aspect of her life, launching a fair trade fabric manufacturing project in Nairobi and putting her manifesto, Active Resistance to Propaganda, on the internet, something that Shelley almost certainly would have done. Shelley drowned in his boat, the Don Juan, which was named after Byron's poem, just before his 30th birthday in 1822. His poem, which was written for his friend Keats, could serve as his own epitaph.
The breath whose might I have invoked in song descends on me. My spirit's bark is driven far from the shore, far from the trembling throng whose sails were never to the tempest given. The massy earth and spirit skies are riven. I am borne darkly, fearfully afar. Whilst burning through the inmost veil of heaven, the soul of Adonais like a star beacons from the abode where the eternal are.
The legacy of Shelley and punk has continued through poets such as John Cooper Clarke and the radical vegan poet Benjamin Zephaniah. And the DJ and filmmaker Don Letts said,
"You look at the charts now and you could believe punk didn't happen, but it manifests itself in design, comedy, film, fashion, photography, poetry, almost everywhere except music today. With previous counterculture, you bought the poster. With punk you got involved, picked up a guitar or a Super 8 camera."
And if Shelley is still regarded as a failure, then in the words of Malcolm McLaren,
better to be a flamboyant failure than any kind of benign success.